My name is Chris Gregoire. I served for 3 terms as the Attorney General for the state of Washington, followed by 2 terms as governor of our great state.
My name is Jay Inslee. I most recently served as Washington State's governor for 12 years, just ending this past January, for the most wonderful, magnificent, most innovative, beautiful state in the United States.
Once the legislature passes a piece of legislation out of both chambers, before it becomes law, it must be sent to the governor for their signature. Although the governor's office resides in the legislative building, the governor is head of the executive branch. So, how do these 2 separate branches work together during the legislative session? The amount of involvement from the executive branch on the bill-making process is largely dependent on the governor's policy focus and leadership style.
Well, obviously, when you're governor, you have a lot of options at all the points of the compass. You can draft legislation and propose it to the legislators. You can work with them to help fashion it as it goes through the committee process.
Madam Chair and members of this esteemed committee, thank you for a chance to discuss Joint Resolution 82.
You can urge legislators to have a little more ambition and hopefully see it your way.
It was 1983, which was the last time we raised the state sales tax. And let me remind you, it was the worst recession in history till this one.
While I was governor, I would meet with what we call the 5 corners. That would be the majority leader and minority leader in the Senate, the speaker and the minority leader in the House. So I would see both the Republican leadership and the Democratic leadership. When I was in office, we faced the Great Recession, so it was absolutely imperative during those tough times that we did that.
And then finally, when it reaches your desk, you can sign it, not sign it. You can, before it gets there, let people know whether or not you're going to sign it, because they might want to make some changes before they send it to your desk.
If the governor approves of the bill, it will be signed into law. But if the governor determines revisions are needed, they can either veto the whole bill or sections of it.
In Washington State, the governor has the authority to veto a section of a bill that's come to their desk. Now, we're not allowed to do line item vetoes. We can veto an appropriation, but we are limited to vetoing a section. There may be a section in a bill that really isn't particularly appropriate for that bill or that issue, or it has an intention associated with it that the governor doesn't think absolutely furthers the intent of the whole bill, in which case a governor can veto that section.
On occasion, you'll have one that has some procedural flaw in them. They're drafted poorly, they make reference to a wrong section. There's a procedural reason for them. If they're ones that violate the basic interests of the state of Washington, they deserve a veto, and they would get them.
Can you clarify on this issue of the bills? Do you plan to veto the bills or just not act and then they become law without your signature?
Well, a veto seems to be a vehicle that would be much more appropriate here. I had a very small number of vetoes, in part because I think we were very successful working with the legislature. But there are stresses when you have one chamber controlled by one party and one by another. And so that involves compromise, negotiation, listening to one another, and try to find the biggest consensus that we can. That takes a lot of work. It takes some gnashing of teeth. It takes some give and take.
When a bill passes during the legislative session and reaches the executive office, the governor has 5 days to act. However, a majority of bills pass in the last 5 days of session. So for those bills, the governor gets 20 days to make a decision.
So a bill comes to the governor having been signed by both the House and the Senate. A clock begins at that point. And the last days of a legislative session are really chaotic. Most bills that come to a governor are allowing that 20-day time frame for which the governor to make a decision.
Once a bill gets to the desk, the governor must either sign or veto, or else the bill becomes law, regardless of signature.
I ask a lot of folks, do you understand the options to a governor? And they can always say, yes, it's you either veto or you sign it and it becomes a law. To which I say, well, there's a third option. Have you ever heard of it? And more often than not, the answer is no. And that third option is do neither. And when a governor does neither one of those things, at the end of the time frame, it automatically becomes law. The option of a governor doing nothing, neither signing nor vetoing, I think probably happens when a governor is struggling with the policy himself or herself, where they haven't made up their mind what's the right thing to do.
Are you inclined to sign that bill? Is that part of the give and take? Are you willing to make that?
I don't know yet. Because I probably have to sign it and I don't want to. How's that for the truth? I mean, I don't want to send kids out of high school not career
I
ready.
don't ever recall an occasion where I didn't either sign or veto. I don't believe in that personally. I believe the people voted you to make tough decisions and make decisions, right or wrong, according to them, but nonetheless make the decisions.
If you decide the bill is something you would not like to put your stamp of approval on, but realizing for one reason or another it's going to have to become law. It may be because an initiative would be filed. You may have to head off an initiative. There might be some other reason. You basically can just not sign the bill. The bill becomes law. But you don't put your John Henry or John Hancock on it. Sometimes that can be important in sending messages to the community.
The governor has a lot of discretionary power at this stage in the process. But it is important to remember that the governor does not work alone.
In first instance, I'm advised by Washingtonians. I mean, I got input from Washingtonians on the street corner, in the grocery store, my family. I get advised by the large group of Washingtonians that I work for. I get advised by the legislators. Like a legislator might have a bill that promoting. They may have talked to me about that, and we talk about it. But the most comprehensive is from the staff that I have that will read the bills and have been familiar with them as they've worked through the process.
It's impossible for a governor to read all of every single bill. So you really have to rely on your folks to do the work that they do.
To sort of run interference, to see are there any places that we really got to be careful on? Has it been drafted correctly? Is it consistent with our other agenda items?
And giving the governor the benefit of what are the arguments on both sides about what the governor should do.
If it was a bill about health, we had a person who worked on health bills, and they would review the health bills. If we had something about state parks, we had a person who did state parks. And those experts would review the bill to make sure they're consistent with what the state really needed.
At the same time, you've got a lawyer in the governor's office who's looking at the bill to say, are there any obvious legal problems with the bill? So there's that review. And then the third review is the budgetary review. Is there a budget attached to it? Is it sufficient? Is it insufficient? And so on. So it is a thorough review. But boy, I got to tell you, it is time consuming, where it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort, it takes overtime consistently by the staff in the governor's office.
So I have some strong values that I bring to the job, and every governor has those. You want to make sure that those values eventually help the most number of people that we can. I believe that we have a fundamental obligation to our children and our grandchildren to pass a state that is healthy for them for decades. Calling that just a personal opinion may belittle or demean the strength and fiber a person that brings to this kind of office. Those value systems are mine, but they're also the majority of Washingtonians. That makes the job a lot smoother.
Personal opinions are always going to be there. But I think a governor really struggles to make sure where appropriate that personal opinion is set aside. And you do what you think is right for the people of this state. As governor, you're not elected to be your own counsel. You're not elected to represent just Republicans or just Democrats. You're elected to represent the entire state of Washington. So you have to be driven. And that's why the people that you bring around you, you encourage them to disagree. You encourage them to tell you why your opinion is wrong, so that you can hear all of that and as a consequence make the right decision. But I'm not going to kid myself. Of course, your personal opinion plays a role, but you have to answer to a bigger, higher calling.